Usually when we think about algorithms, we picture these helpful, invisible little matchmakers.
Right, like a digital concierge or something.
Exactly, a concierge. You log onto an app and it casually suggests, like, hey, based on what you watched last night, you might like this movie. Or, I don't know, here's a pair of running shoes you might want.
Yeah, it feels very personalized and, well, passive.
Right, it feels passive. But what if that completely misunderstands the actual architecture of our digital lives? What if the algorithm isn't a matchmaker at all, but more like a city planner?
Oh, that's a great way to put it. A city planner.
Yeah, a planner who doesn't explicitly tell businesses what to sell, but decides exactly which streets get streetlights, which neighborhoods get foot traffic, and, which ones are just left entirely in the dark.
And that shift in perspective,
hmm
it changes everything about how we understand the modern market. Because,
Mm.
I mean, if you control the streetlights, you control the commerce.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today we were diving into a massive, frankly paradigm-shifting 2026 paper published in the Strategic Management Journal by Zhang and colleagues.
Yes, the algorithm doesn't recommend it orchestrates.
That's the one. And what we are going to explore in this deep dive is how artificial intelligence algorithms dictate how businesses compete, what products even make it to the development phase, and ultimately, who survives.
Right, and what makes this research so compelling is that Zhang and the team didn't just write some theoretical piece. They conducted an exhaustive empirical study using 1.7 million observations.
1.7 million. Wow.
Yeah, from a major food-sharing platform. We are talking about a granular, real-time look at how sellers, so in this case, food vendors and restaurants, actively mutated their business strategies the very moment the platform changed its underlying code.
They literally watched the mutation happen in real time.
Exactly. And the baseline takeaway here is that traditional strategy, like the idea of finding product market fit, is largely obsolete in these environments. Today, survival is entirely about product algorithm fit.
Product algorithm fit. I mean, that phrase alone reorients how you have to think about building a business or a brand today.
It completely flips the script.
But before we get to the macro implications, I want to dig into that food sharing study. How did the researchers actually isolate the algorithm's effect from just, normal market trends? Because 1.7 million data points is a staggering amount of noise to sift through.
It is. But they utilized a natural experiment. The platform they studied implemented a system-wide shift in its recommendation engine.
Okay, so a massive update.
Right. It moved away from simply showing users the most universally popular items and shifted toward a highly personalized feed. And because the researchers had access to the data from before, during, and after this algorithmic shift, they could track the exact behavioral changes of the vendors.
So they weren't just looking at, like, who sold more burgers.
No, not at all. They tracked menu updates, ingredient overlap, pricing adjustments, and promotional spend.
So they were watching the vendors literally rewrite their own DNA to appease the new code.
Yes. And it all comes down to the mechanism of control, which the researchers identify as visibility.
Visibility.
Right. Visibility is the absolute currency of the algorithmic economy. If the system's mathematical logic does not push your product into a user's feed, your underlying quality is completely irrelevant.
Right, because nobody even knows you exist.
Exactly. You could be cooking the greatest meals in the city, but without algorithmic exposure, you have zero market presence. Firms are no longer competing directly against each other for consumer attention.
They are competing to align with the platform's visibility logic.
You hit the nail on the head.
That makes total sense. And if we think about how that visibility logic actually works in practice, it really depends on the mathematical goals of the platform. Let's look at the two distinct algorithmic regimes the researchers categorize.
What's fascinating here is how clearly they define these regimes.
Yeah.
They call the first one PopRec, which stands for Popularity-Based Recommendation.
PopRec.
And the second is PersRec, or Personalization-Based Recommendation.
Let's translate those into environments you, the listener, interact with every day. If you are a restaurant operating on a delivery app like, say, Uber Eats or DoorDash, you are largely dealing with a PopRec system.
Right, because the algorithm is optimizing for aggregate signals.
Exactly. It wants high overall star ratings, high volume, low cancellation rates. To survive in that environment, your strategy is exploitation. You want to narrow your focus to just a few highly perfected dishes.
Because consistency is everything there.
Right. You do not want to risk throwing some wild experimental fusion dish on the menu because a few bad reviews will tank your aggregate score, dim your streetlight, and basically kill your business.
The mathematical logic of PopRec prioritizes certainty. It uses aggregate smoothing to find the safest, most universally acceptable bet. As a result, the ecosystem becomes incredibly stable and reliable, but
But innovation just grinds to a halt.
it does. Firms are heavily penalized for introducing untested offerings because new items inherently lack historical data.
But then we pivot to the PERS-REC regime. Think about the mathematical logic of a platform like YouTube. It doesn't just want universally acceptable content. It wants to capture every single micro-preference of its billions of users.
Right. It uses complex embedding spaces and collaborative filtering.
Yeah, to match highly specific content to highly specific, heterogeneous tastes. So if you are a creator in a PERS-RIC environment, your strategy shifts from exploitation to exploration. You are incentivized to produce a massive, diverse portfolio of videos covering endless niches.
And the friction arises because chasing that visibility requires immense resources. To feed a personalization algorithm, a firm has to constantly throw new variations at the wall.
They have to just keep feeding the machine.
Exactly. They have to expand their portfolios and target microsegments.
Yep.
And the trade-off is severe. As they diversify to remain relevant across dozens of fragmented feeds, they dilute their core competencies.
So deep specialization is basically sacrifice at the altar of broad relevance.
That's exactly what happens.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when I first read about this dynamic, I made a very logical but apparently completely flawed assumption.
Ooh, what was that?
Well, I assumed that a personalization system PERS-REC would naturally be the ultimate equalizer. I mean, if an algorithm is designed to find hyper-specific niches and match them to individual users, wouldn't that democratize the market?
It sounds like it should, right?
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect environment for the little guy to finally find their specific audience without having to compete with the massive mainstream hits.
And that is exactly the hypothesis many technologists and economists held for a long time. The assumption was that personalization would dismantle monopolies by elevating the long tail of the market.
But the data from Zhang's study shatters that assumption completely.
It really does. The market-level outcomes reveal a stark paradox. PopRec, the system that simply rewards the most popular items, actually reduces inequality. PERS-REC, the highly customized system, drastically increases it.
Okay, I'm going to need you to walk through the mechanics of that, because on the surface, rewarding the most popular items sounds like a recipe for a rich, get-richer monopoly. How does a popularity contest actually level the playing field?
It comes down to the standardization of the quality signal. Under a PopRec system, the algorithm evaluates everyone using the exact same objective metric.
Like a star rating.
Usually, yes. That standardized rating system out of 5 stars, combined with basic order volume. If a previously unknown undercapitalized firm enters the market and produces a phenomenal product, early adopters will give it perfect ratings.
Oh, I see.
The PopRec algorithm is relatively simple. It reads those high aggregate scores as a pure quality signal and promotes the product.
So a 5-star review for a mom-and-pop shop weighs the exact same mathematically as a 5-star review for a multinational chain.
Exactly. The simplicity of the metric allows high-quality offerings to become discoverable strictly on merit, regardless of the brand's prior size or, their marketing budget.
That's wild.
And the data show that this dynamic actively, albeit slightly, reduces the market share of established superstars. The giants are forced to compete on the pure, standardized quality of their core offerings against everyone else in the system.
Okay, so PopRec relies on a universal metric that anyone can achieve if their product is good enough. Why does PERS-REC do the opposite? Why does the system designed to find niche audiences result in what the authors call algorithmically amplified inequality?
Because executing a strategy for true personalization requires capabilities that only the largest corporations possess. Let's look at the infrastructure required to succeed in a PERS-REC environment.
It's not just about making a good video or a good burger anymore.
No, not at all. To successfully target dozens of different microsegments, a firm needs vast pipelines of consumer data. They need advanced predictive analytics to interpret that data.
Right.
They need the operational capacity to manage a constantly shifting, massive portfolio of products. And crucially, they need the financial capital to absorb the continuous costs of endless A/B testing and experimentation.
Because the mom and pop shop doesn't have an entire department dedicated to data science. They can't afford to launch 50 different variations of a product just to see which ones get picked up by different personalized feeds.
They cannot. But the dominant firms with deep pockets and rich data ecosystems can. They deploy their resources to blanket the ecosystem with diverse offerings, capturing almost all of the fragmented niches.
So they just swallow up all the little long tail markets.
Exactly. The algorithm naturally favors them because they are the only ones capable of producing the sheer volume of heterogeneous data the system craves. Small differences in underlying technical capability translate into massive, insurmountable differences in visibility.
So the system that feels the most bespoke to the user is actually the mechanism consolidating corporate power in the background. That is that's incredible. And what is so striking about this research is that this algorithm-mediated competition isn't confined to food delivery or social media.
No, it's everywhere.
Right, these algorithmic regimes are actively rewriting the rules of the highest stakes industries in our society.
And the study details how these collisions between algorithmic logic and traditional industry structures are playing out. The systemic risks they introduce are substantial.
Let's trace how this friction scales across different sectors. If we start with hospitality and tourism, so platforms like Booking.com or Airbnb, we see the immediate operational toll. Under a pop rec model, a boutique hotel might focus purely on standardized excellence.
They aim to be the premier eco-friendly stay in their region, polishing that single experience to guarantee high ratings.
Exactly. But as those platforms shift toward PERS rec feeds, that same hotel is pressured to capture different microsegments. Now they have to offer like a wellness retreat package, a long stay package for remote workers, and an adventure package for families.
And the friction there is operational chaos. The physical and logistical reality of running a hotel cannot bend as easily as digital code. Trying to be everything to everyone to satisfy a personalization algorithm stretches their resources, ultimately degrading the quality of their core service.
And that risk of over-customization becomes a literal systemic threat when we transition from hospitality to banking and finance. We are talking about institutions like JP Morgan or digital platforms like Robinhood.
That's a huge shift. Historically, retail banking relied heavily on a pop rec model.
Right, they had one flagship credit card or one primary savings account. It benefited from massive scale, it was simple to market, and the risk models were incredibly stable because the data pool was enormous and unified.
But the financial sector's pivot toward algorithmic personalization completely alters that risk profile. Now, platforms want to recommend tailored financial portfolios.
Oh boy.
They want to offer a specific micro-lending product exclusively for gig workers or a customized algorithm-managed investment vehicle based on individuals' minute-by-minute spending habits.
Which requires slicing the risk pools into smaller and smaller fragments.
And returning to the inequality paradox, only the megabanks possess the advanced AI infrastructure and massive balance sheets required to safely model risk across 50 different personalized financial products.
So the smaller credit unions or regional banks they're effectively rendered invisible.
Exactly, because they cannot safely generate the diversity of products the PERSREG algorithm demands.
You see the exact same consolidation happening in retail with Amazon and Shopify. Sellers are caught in a brutal tug of war. Do you focus all your capital on one flagship product to win the broad search rankings? Or do you dilute your manufacturing to offer endless variations of colors and bundles to populate personalized recommendation widgets?
It's an impossible choice for a small seller.
It really is. But frankly, the sector that truly underscores the gravity of this research is healthcare. When we talk about platforms like Epic Systems or patient-facing networks like ZocDoc, this tension between algorithmic reward and business strategy fundamentally alters the delivery of medicine.
The healthcare implications are profound because recommendation systems in this space aren't just shaping market outcomes, they are dictating clinical pathways.
Let's look at the mechanics of that. If a regional specialty clinic operates in a pop-rec environment where a platform ranks providers based on aggregate patient outcomes and satisfaction scores, their strategy is strict standardization.
Right. They might focus entirely on becoming the absolute best facility for knee replacements. They build specialized, repeatable protocols. That aggregate excellence gets them visibility.
But what happens when healthcare networks transition to predictive per-rec models? Algorithms that want to recommend flexible, highly customized care pathways based on a patient's genetic markers, lifestyle data, and localized risk factors.
The pressure on the healthcare provider becomes immense. Pursuing that level of hyper-personalized care requires seamless, real-time data integration across multiple disciplines.
Which sounds incredibly expensive.
It is. It requires continuous monitoring tech and highly flexible staffing models. If a mid-sized clinic attempts to chase algorithmic visibility by offering personalized pathways without having the massive infrastructure required to support it, they risk a serious degradation in clinical rigor.
I mean, the stakes there are incredibly high. It forces medical facilities into the exact same inequality paradox we saw with the food vendors. The well-funded, massive hospital conglomerates have the data infrastructure to dominate personalized healthcare recommendations. Meanwhile, smaller, high-quality local practices that specialize in standard care simply lose their digital visibility.
It requires healthcare administrators to confront a very difficult strategic reality. Are they designing their clinical operations around the actual localized needs of their patients? Or are they structuring their care to align with the mathematical logic of the system that determines whether patients ever find them in the first place?
Wow. So what does this all mean for the listener? We've looked at how megabanks, hospital systems, and global hotel chains are forced to mutate their operations to achieve product algorithm fit. But this orchestration applies just as heavily to the individual.
Absolutely.
Whether you are an early stage entrepreneur, a freelancer on a gig platform, or a creator building a personal brand, the algorithm is shaping your decisions.
For early-stage entrepreneurs, the research offers a crucial warning about resource allocation. In algorithmic environments, scaling too early can be fatal. Startups operate with extremely constrained capital. If an entrepreneur misunderstands the platform's regime, they will burn that capital instantly.
Let's say a startup launches on a marketplace like Amazon. If they assume they need to offer a wide variety of products to capture different customers, they might launch 5 different items at once. But by doing that, they divide their initial sales and reviews across 5 different listings.
And in doing so, they dilute their performance signals. None of those 5 products gain enough aggregate traction to trigger the pop-rec elements of the algorithm.
So they just never get off the ground.
Right. They fail to reach the necessary velocity, the algorithm ignores them, and the entire company loses its visibility. They have to understand that depth perfecting one single offering to build an undeniable aggregate signal is often the only viable strategy until they have the capital to fund exploration.
The study also highlights how public figures and celebrities have to navigate these same mathematical forces, which proves that even human personality is subject to algorithmic orchestration. They contrast the strategies of Cristiano Ronaldo with figures like Taylor Swift and Mr. Beast.
The contrast perfectly illustrates how human behavior adapts to different regimes. Cristiano Ronaldo operates almost exclusively on popularity-based, engagement-driven logic.
So a pop rec system.
Yes, his public persona is highly rigid and predictable. It's strictly centered on fitness, elite performance, and discipline. That consistency is his strategy. The algorithm can perfectly predict how his content will perform and who will engage with it, so the signal-to-noise ratio is incredibly strong.
But then you analyze someone like Taylor Swift or a digital native creator like Mr. Beast. They're operating at the absolute pinnacle of the PersRec environment. They're constantly diversifying their output.
Right, they never stay in one lane.
Never.
Yeah.
Swift might release an intimate acoustic session, followed by a highly produced pop stadium video, followed by a behind-the-scenes documentary clip. Mr. Beast will pivot from a massive philanthropic stunt to a localized gaming challenge. They are purposefully capturing countless micro-communities.
They are managing their own identities as if they were a massive corporate product portfolio designed specifically to feed the endless appetite of a personalization algorithm.
Which brings us to the core utility of this deep dive for you, the listener. How do you actually operate in a world where visibility is controlled by an orchestrating algorithm?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the authors of the study argue that platform literacy is no longer just a technical skill. It is a fundamental form of human capital.
Platform literacy, I like that.
Before you launch a product, before you write a post, before you structure a service, you have to diagnose the platform's logic. You must ask yourself, does this environment reward relentless consistency and aggregate perfection, or does it reward constant evolution and multidimensional experimentation?
Because misalignment is the death of visibility. If you spend your limited time and money constantly tweaking and pivoting your brand on a platform that uses a pop rec logic, you will never build the aggregate signal required to get noticed.
And conversely, if you remain rigidly specialized on a platform driven by PersRec, you will be drowned out by competitors who are feeding the machine the diverse data it craves.
The environment is no longer a neutral backdrop. You are not just building a career, a business, or a brand in a vacuum. You are building an entity that must mathematically integrate with the algorithm that governs your specific market.
Strategy is now co-determined. The platform is an active participant in your decision-making.
It really is.
It uses its code as an instrument of soft control, nudging your behavior, quietly closing certain doors while illuminating others, and indirectly dictating how you spend your time, your capital, and your creativity.
It is a fundamental shift in the locus of strategic control, moving from the internal boardroom or the individual creator's mind directly into the hands of the platform architects.
It's a completely new paradigm.
It is a profound realization, and it leaves us with one final, lingering question to mull over. If we are constantly adapting our business models, our creative output, and even our public personalities to perfectly align with what an algorithm mathematically rewards today, what happens to our identity when that platform inevitably updates its code tomorrow or goes offline entirely?
Yeah.
If you build your entire self to fit a machine's logic, who are you when the machine is unplugged?
That is the ultimate strategic and personal risk of the algorithmic age.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you open an app on your phone, take a second to look beyond the recommendations, look at the streets the city planner has illuminated for you, and ask yourself, what behavior is this machine actively trying to orchestrate? We'll catch you next time.